Philosophicate, very quick to agitate, concentrate till I rate, I'm irate, in a state, my confidence is a trait, success is my mother.
心臓を捧げよう。捧げよう？捧げよう？捧げよう? I don't know. Attack on Titan is a story we've all been following for 10 years. At that time, we were gripped by its post-apocalyptic premise of humanity being forced to reside within an enclosed space like a cage to avoid being food for gigantic monsters, which lurked beyond the walls, which kept humanity safe. Back then, it was thematically very simple. It was a very clear good versus evil story. Heroes versus villains, oppressed versus oppressors. But just as the people of Paradise did, we wanted humanity to breach beyond the walls to attain that sweet, seductive, self-entitled prize called freedom. As we know from viewing, we were deliberately given a biased perspective to give a fuller understanding of where the story might conclude. Eren is arguably the focal point of Attack on Titan, and given his connection to the founding Titan, he was in control of major events of the story, and even minor events for that matter. Isayama is a master at foreshadowing, and only on a rewatch can we piece together that things were not going to be as they appeared. Now that Attack on Titan has ended, what was the point? What did it all mean? How did the expectations that the show offered us compare with how things inevitably turned out? What was the thread connecting the story of Attack on Titan? Throughout our history, only one thing has stayed the same. Not our culture, our ways of life, or even our wisdom. It's us. Humans, human nature. I believe that in understanding human nature, we will also gain a deeper comprehension and maybe appreciation of Attack on Titan. Let's start with war. To begin the origins of war is to begin recalling the beginning of humanity itself. Man has always wanted to protect what it has. Man has always wanted and coveted their neighbor. What happens when these behaviors overlap? Glory, pride, death, and destruction. The only difference is how the war is waged. In ancient times, men would use seemingly medieval tools by today's standards like spears and knives and daggers and swords and bows, but now we use artillery and nuclear weapons. So tell me, do you think that having Titan powers changes the nature of war and thus the nature of humanity? Is a war just if our enemies aren't like us? Maybe some kind of animal or alien? That was the hope of all sides in Attack on Titan, with Marley believing those on Paradise to be actual devils, and people in Marley believing that to be the case, versus in Paradise where they had these literal manifestations of monsters being the Titans coming to attack and eat them, when little did they know they were actually people who had become these monsters. As long as our enemies are depicted as not like us in any type of way, war could be seen as a just action for a just cause. That which being this very vague and open to interpretation concept of freedom. Extremely problematic in the context of war, seeing that it leads to massive contradictions and actions on behalf of those seeking it. The reason is that it has a very wide interpretation of meanings and definitions. In the context of the real world, let's look at a few examples from famous philosophers. Man is condemned to be free because he is thrown into the world. He is responsible for everything he does. It is up to you to give a meaning. For to be free is to not merely cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. I prayed for freedom for 20 years, but received no answer until I prayed with my legs. From these three quotes, we have much contrast. One is self-interpretive, one is living by interest of others, and the other emphasizes how only action can take us to where we want to go. With so many forces in Attack on Titan, with their own ideas of what it means to be free, how are these ideas interpreted? Keep moving forward. Fight. These are the mantras that Eren carried in the latter half of the series. Well, at face value, it seems he is fighting despite the cost to achieve an overall freedom. How free is he in that pursuit? He has been described as a slave to freedom, a juxtapositioning description of his approach. In truth, Eren was attached to an idea, even though the idea was liberation itself from hierarchical control. By attaching single-mindedly to an outcome, you become obedient to that goal. So, by definition, you are not free. Buddhism speaks on this topic a lot, proposing how attaching to an outcome can cause suffering. Despite what Eren foresaw and managed to achieve, he lived his life not being free. He was confined within the walls, shackled with the founding Titan's power, and forced himself forward. If he had his way, he would have spent the last years of his life living with Mikasa in peace. It was entirely possible for Eren to have had been free within the walls if it wasn't for the events of the first episode. Events which we learn that he had triggered. Events which got his mother killed. All in the name of freedom. Eren hated having to do it. He hated not being able to live the way he wanted, and the idea of dying even though he committed mass genocide presented another face of humanity. Hypocrisy. As mentioned earlier, in Attack on Titan, mirroring events are ever present. Characters which experience tragedy only serve to commit the same atrocities themselves. In a world where it's life or death, there can be no good or bad people. Most would rather kill themselves, right? To die a hero or live to become a villain. Eren witnessed an attack on his home, only to do the same to Marley in the final season. Armin wanted to not kill at one point, but ended up committing mass murder, also killing innocent children and women, men, everybody, all types of people. This hypocrisy is innately human. All like to believe that we are good people, but when pushed to the edge, most would rather commit evil than risk their own lives. This exact phenomena was present in Nazi Germany. Seemingly normal civilians were slowly converted through lies and propaganda into believing that Jews were the devils, the same way that the Malians believed that those on Paradis were devils. This also led to genocide and the final solution in the Holocaust. In order to successfully build walls between people, racism definitely helped. Beliefs in race superiority or demonizing other races make it that much easier to justify abuse and war on fellow man. This was the foundation of much of the conflict on Attack on Titan. And in the real world, I mean, look at Israel and Palestine, still going on today. However, due to the fictional nature of Attack on Titan, we can go far back as possible and gain a wider perspective on war in the present. We now know about the love that Ymir had for Fritz about 2,000 years ago. Shackled by her feelings, the Titans were able to continue existing. Love is the base of all humanity. It's what humans seek, and it's the way that humans reproduce and survive. In the real world, seemingly simple stories like this one can have a domino effect, leading to the war and violence of today. The most famous story of this is Adam and Eve, where one mistake, eating the forbidden fruit, detached them from God, leading to a selfish, ego-fueled version of humanity, straying far away from what God had originally intended. With this seemingly eternal cycle presented by Attack on Titan, which is reflected by the real world, what is the point, right? Zeke proposed a nihilist philosophy after being in the past for so long and realizing the only point of the fighting is to ensure the survival of the species. What's the point if we're all gonna die anyway? Armin gives Zeke a baseball, and this changes everyone's fate drastically. It's perfect because this object is the true purpose of all this conflict, human experience, and Attack on Titan's main message. When Armin handed Zeke that ball, everything began to make sense again. His memories of playing baseball flooding back, the time he was happiest, the time where he felt he could have stayed forever. In that moment, Zeke realized what made his life worth living. It was something that brought him joy and happiness. It was a kind of flow state in this existential dread. And that was when his soul was quelled and truly at peace. This is the meaning of Attack on Titan. This is what it means to be free. Symbolically, without this occurrence, Zeke wouldn't have come out and be killed and the rumbling stopped. And that is the meaning of Attack on Titan. Sometimes I feel like things have to be perfect for me to be happy. If I accomplish a very lofty ideal, maybe that would make my life worth it. But until that happens, I just keep moving forward. And until that happens, I won't really grasp it. I'm sure we all feel like the grass is greener somewhere, somehow, or that circumstances could be better if things had only been that much more different. Attack on Titan is a story containing the nature of war, the dark side of ambition, and how hope can be a guiding light when the world is nothing but darkness. The world is cruel, but it's also beautiful. Humans can sacrifice for the good of others and strive for a future that they might not even see. In a world of suffering, sometimes the only option is for the ends to justify the means. However, if we are afforded the luxury of peace, we should really embrace that as tightly as we possibly can, because we don't know how long that's going to last. Looking back on the series now, it seems our main characters were happiest in the beginning, and what would have happened if they just lived their lives peacefully in the walls? I mean, who knows? Anyway, thank you, Hajime Isayama, for 10 amazing years of great storytelling and one of the greatest pieces of fiction I've ever seen. I've been Solance, and have a great day.
Season and I'm out for the kill. Adrenaline pumping through my veins, now I'm feeling the thrill. Call me Itachi, you won't see me. Tsukuyomi. Undeniable.